should be recording to the right directory this time. So sorry about last time. Last class's video just didn't make it. I was recording to the wrong hard drive. It ran out of space, and then that means it corrupted the entire file. So hopefully the older versions of the files are not too much, or the older versions of the videos are not too much different. I mean, I'm sure I kind of explained it slightly differently or in a slightly different order here and there, but if there was anything you feel like wasn't covered, wave me down, and we're going to have a little bit of open work time in class over the next few days. In fact, we may even get to that point today to where I quit a little early and you can get going. So I want to talk just a minute about a couple things. One, grade-wise, I think everybody, I have everything, all of your exercises graded up to this point, and I have Project 1 graded. I haven't finished grading Project 2 yet, but I really am wanting to get that done very soon, so possibly even this afternoon, you know, if the extra time fairies bless me with extra time. If you are wanting to follow along, I have the WebEx broadcasting right now. Again, you can find that up on the network. ETSU E3, classes, Greg, and it's this WebEx link. So you can follow along there, and I'm recording the video. But let's talk about D2L really quickly. If we check out our class, again, I'm not going to click on the grades because I don't want you to see other people's grades. But there are, everything should be in there up until this last project. I don't think I've combed through all of the revisions yet. So what I will do is whatever grade you have in there now, if there's a revision in there, I usually make a note in the comments that says, you know, updated the grade from this to this based off of what was in the revisions folder. And then I put that into another folder in the revisions folder so I know it's been graded. So again, please consider doing revisions, particularly on Project 1 since you already have the grades for that. And what I wanted to talk about today, really quick in D2L, is under content, our assignments. So we are currently on PR3 breakfast. And I wanted to talk really briefly about our due date, Monday, November 12th. So if we look at a calendar, that's a week from today. Today is going to be the last day that I have a specific lecture planned, and I don't think it's even going to cover all of class. It may if we end up doing some recapping on some of the end particle stuff that we did before. But I just wanted to kind of give you an update because I know the schedule has kind of changed just a little bit based off of the schedule online or on the website. So November 12th. Now, sometimes you need to prioritize, like, I've seen this happen a lot. People are like, ooh, I want to model this really awesome chandelier hanging from the ceiling. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a lot of the grade, right? So you're going to invest a lot of time into something that's not one of the gradable items. That's cool if you like that, but just make sure that the gradable elements, like make sure you're kind of paying attention to those as well. Just for the sake of like making sure you're addressing the things that are going to get the most bang for your buck. In this case, modeling is one of them, but it's really just modeling those. I know it's a little faint to see it. It's modeling those extra items that we had for the breakfast table. Lighting and rendering, we went over a lot about the unwrapping the objects and getting materials, working our cereal box and stuff like that. So, so there will be like a little bit of an emphasis on that. Like that'll be what I'm looking at is, how's the lighting working on this? And this is a fun scene that you should be able to get some pretty neat stuff. There's a lot of reflective things on a breakfast table. There's a lot of neat textures. The cereal simulation, which is what we went over last class period, how did that go for you? Anybody have theirs working in a way that they like? That many of you? Okay. How many of you feel completely lost on that one, on the cereal simulation? How many of you feel reluctant to raise a hand today? I know what's going on. Okay. All right. Well, that's one of the reasons I'm trying to scale back on lectures starting today. Is that way, like if you're having those issues, grab me. I'll help you simulate it. The simulation stuff is a lot of. Usually, the error you're having is, oh yeah, I forgot to click that button, or oh yeah, I forgot to set it to real time, or oh yeah, I forgot that I can't scrub in my timeline. Like it's something small, right? And so those are a lot of questions that I can kind of walk around and answer. Because the process, once you get the hang of what we did there, like if you did this 3 times, that third time, it would be like, oh, this is easy. Click, 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 and it's done, right? So the serial simulation is one of the ones that is a gradable item. I always put overall presentation in here because let's face it, like you can UV unwrap your object well, you can model the objects okay, you can put some lights in there and have like a nice check mark for all of those, and it all just still kind of comes together, not the best in the world, right? So it's like sort of thinking about the fact that all the audience gets to see is the pixels you render for them at the end, right? So pulling that together into an overall presentation. So today what we're looking at is the coffee simulation. Now, I'd probably, in the name of like saving space on this gradable item, what I'm really talking about is some steam, right? We're not going to pour coffee into a cup or anything like that. Maya can do that, but that's way more complicated than you might think. So what we're going to work on today is just creating a little bit of steam in there to kind of give the scene, like that's one of those things that most people, when they watch it, they don't even notice it. But once you kind of point it out to them, it is part of what's keeping the scene alive. It's just a little bit of ambient motion coming out of your coffee cup, and just something to make it feel like it has an environment to it. So, any questions or anything before we move on? We'll do this. Okay, so I will say one more note that is outside of class related, which is Thursday. Mark Thomas, this is probably on, some of you may not have this on your background. I don't know why. It's like it's loading the background for some people, and for other people it doesn't. Mark Thomas is going to be here this Thursday. Mark Thomas is going to be chatting with us over Skype this Thursday. He was an animator from Bethesda, worked on Skyrim and, or I think it was some expansions of Skyrim, and Fallout 76, and all of that. So I worked with him at Firaxis as well. So he worked on XCOM, and I think he had a couple of other things there. If animation is what you're really kind of enjoying right now, he's a great resource. Like he's going to, he's been in this for a little while. He'll be able to answer questions, and he's super friendly. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. All right. So let's go ahead and open up Maya. Double check and make sure I'm recording. I am recording. And I'm going to go ahead and set my project. Now again, I know I harp on this. File, set project. For this project, is probably one of the most important things to remember at this point. Because you've worked a lot on texturing, we've worked a lot on simulating, so that means it's saving cache files. If you're not setting your project and you don't have your project organized in a way that Maya can find all of those elements again, like I've just seen so many people who just were not able to turn this project in on the due date because they just were not setting their project. So this is the time to kind of remedy that. So I'm going to set my project. Again, mine, I think I've shown you this too. It's File, Set Project. If you forget and you go File, Open Scene, there's also an option to set your project right here. So either of those will work. I think I'm keeping mine up in my faculty folder. And it is modified. Yeah, that's what I'm talking. Okay, now mine loaded, did not seem to load with the textures. A reminder, 4 is wireframe, 5 is shaded, 6 is textured. Okay, so I get emails from people who are like, Marlo, all my textures are gone. And I come in the next morning and press 6, it comes on. So it's little things like that that are easy to forget. Sometimes your textures will be gone. And the reason for that is because your textures are not in your project or you didn't set your project appropriately. So let me just show you, like, if that ever happens, here's how you can fix it. If I open this up and it just, like, usually if that texture, if it can't find it, it will give me an error, like a yellow error or a red error along the bottom here. And if I go to my attribute editor with this serial box selected and find my material, AI standard surface, I can always go back to this color channel and click here and see where it's looking for it. Now here's what I want you to notice. It's looking in source images / and it's finding the file serial color.png. If what you see when you go here is something that starts with a drive letter like D or F colon, you know, my hard drive or desktop or whatever, like, that means it's looking for it in a specific place, right? It's looking for it on your computer, at your house, in your room, not here, right? Or it's looking for it, this is the one that even messes it up sometimes. It's looking for it on the F drive, right? Which may be your portable hard drive when you plug it into this computer, but when you plug it into this computer over there, it calls it the G drive, and then suddenly Maya's like, I can't find the texture, right? This is why we set our project. If we set our project, Maya just says, wherever our project is set, it is in the source images folder of that folder, right? It is under there. And so it is just telling us a local path, I'm sorry, what is the word? A relative path to our project, right? Not a finite path that is only one of them exists, right? So that all loaded up on mine, but if any reason that doesn't happen, just set your project, go in here and point it back to the right file, okay? Like, you may have to go looking for it again, but that's how you would fix it. All of this stuff has to be set before you can render on the render farm if you're planning on rendering on the render farm. So I think I cached mine before I left. I don't remember if I recached it because I remember deleting the cache. So let's see what happens. Yep, it's not cached. And the way you can tell is that if I scrub my timeline backwards, it doesn't know how to simulate backwards, right? And so everything's messed up. That means it's not cached, right? Maya has not sort of baked out the location for those keyframes. So for those serial pieces. So just to make sure we have that one more time, I'm going to select my end particle, okay, and I'm going to go to Effects, In Cache, Create New Cache, and Object. I'm just going to say Replace Existing. And it will go ahead and cache out all of my files, or all of my frames. And I'm just doing this so I kind of have my scene the way I want it, right? Again, I know I'm harping on this setting project thing, but it's because I see it a lot. If you haven't set your project, you cache this out, and then you upload it to the render farm to render, or even try to render on one machine. Sometimes your serial will not pour out consistently, and what it'll happen is it'll look like it's just vibrating everywhere, right? So that's a lot of times because it can't find the cache file, or you didn't create a cache file. So you may or may not see that once you render if you haven't set your project and you don't cache it out. So I have it cached now, and you can tell that if I back it up, it will play forward and backward correctly, right? So we're kind of back where I want to be. Let me go ahead and increment and save. So the next thing I want to do is add just a little bit of steam coming out of my coffee cup here. So I'm going to talk about steam sort of in relation to lighting, because I can make some steam look good in my viewport pretty easily. But steam has a, or any type of smoke, any type of simulation like this, cloud-based simulation, has a lot to do with lighting, right? So, like, smoke coming off of a dark campfire versus smoke coming off of a fire in broad daylight is going to look much different. Like, that campfire smoke is going to be darker. It's going to have more contrast, whereas like the bright light outside may sort of pass through that smoke during the daytime, and it may seem fainter. So one of the mistakes I see a lot of people do is they start simulating at this point, and they get something that looks really good in their viewport, and they work on that for a long time, and then they render and it doesn't look great in their viewport. So you're going to want to bounce back and forth between your viewport and your render view. But first, let's just sort of talk about how to make this exist at all. So we've been using end particles, right? This actually isn't a particle. What we're going to use is called a fluid. So if we go to, where am I at? I'm not seeing it. There we go, fluids. Right next to end particle, we're going to see a couple of things. Fluids can exist in multiple different formats. What we're wanting is a 3D container. Okay, so we want something that has volume to it. You can have a 2D smoke. It's a little easier to simulate, a little easier to control. And if you're only ever going to see it like far off in the distance, you know, coming out of a chimney in a house a half a mile away, then that probably works pretty well. A 3D container, though, if I click this, it's going to give us two things. Watch what pops up here. I get a fluid 1, and you'll see that there's a little plus sign beside it right there. Right? And if I click on that plus side, you'll see that there's a fluid emitter parented to that. Right? So if I grab this fluid 1, I'm just going to move it over here somewhere where we can see it a little more clearly. You'll see that the emitter parented to it goes with it. Now again, I want this to be playing every frame max real time, my playback speed. And if I hit play on this, nothing's going to really happen until we get to frame 0 or frame 1. But when it does, what you'll see is it'll start making sort of this cloud inside of this box. So give it just a second. There it goes. Now, at first glance, this isn't that impressive, and even worse, it starts to sort of mushroom cloud at the top, right? It's because it's hitting the top of our container. Right? We get this steam that kind of spews up, and then it's like, oh, out of room, I hit the ceiling, right? But we didn't really want it to hit the ceiling. We want it to keep going. So, first thing, since I've cached this, I can now reduce my timeline down to start on frame 1 if I wanted to. I can also, I'm pretty sure in my Steam, I can change my start frame. So we have a, I think we have a time node in here, but I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. More than anything, let's worry about how we're going to make this thing simulate correctly. So I'm going to move this around until it feels like that emitter is coming off of my coffee. Right, so something like this. So now I'm getting like a little mushroom cloud coming off of my coffee. Right. If I go back to the start, you'll see that that's what we're getting. Now, if we go in here and look really closely, you'll start to, maybe you can see it, I don't know, if I kind of move around, you can definitely see it as it starts moving. It looks kind of like, can you kind of see like down here, it's getting a little pixelated around it. So, how many of you have played Minecraft? Anybody play Minecraft? Anybody? Yes, okay. So we call Minecraft a voxel game. Right. Anybody know what voxel means? Like what we're talking about there? block based. It's volume based, right? So basically, what happens in Minecraft, in theory, at least with the construction part, and is the same thing that's happening here, is just like a pixel divides up a 2D image into a series of blocks, right? And they're really tiny, but like you can't have half of a pixel, right? Those are like units of measure for a 2D image. A voxel is a unit of measure for a 3D space. Okay? And so basically what we have in here, and if you kind of look at this, this fluid container, you'll see it, is we have this 10 by 10 voxel space. And it's really 10 by 10 by 10, right? It's going 10 upwards as well. And what Maya is doing is it's taking this emitter and it's allowing this emitter to have a fuel and a temperature and an amount of energy, and it's for lack of a better phrase, like contaminating or traversing, like it's trickling throughout this entire space, right? So if one voxel, if one of those little cubes inside of this space fills up with smoke, it would just sort of go to reason that it would sort of trickle into that next cube, right? And then that next cube would trickle into that next cube. We can make these cubes more or less detailed. We can by changing our base resolution here, right? So if I change this up to something like 30, we hit play, you're going to see it kind of like divides those voxels up, and now we have a little bit more steam coming out of there. Like it's a little bit more wispy, right? Let's take that down a little bit. And we just got to add a little bit more detail to it, right? Now, the more of this you add, the more detail or the more like calculations Maya is going to have to do, right? So if I were to crank this up to something like 70, like Maya is going to slow down a lot, right? It doesn't mean like it may look better at 70, but it's going to play back slower. So you don't want to just always crank up the highest number. Cranking up the highest number is maybe not the most efficient way of doing it. You just want enough resolution for what you're wanting to do. I would think in our case, I'm going to be back here somewhere. I'm thinking somewhere 30 to 50 will probably do it. So I'm going to go ahead and leave mine at 30 for right now. And again, hit play on that. And that's not looking too bad. Okay. The problem with it, though, is we're getting this, like, this mushroom cloud at the top, right? I don't want it to flatten out like that. And even if we keep playing it, it also will start to kind of go down the walls, right? So that's not very realistic. What I'm going to do is, in this Fluid 1 container, I'm going to go down, and there's a tab here that says Auto Resize. So I'm going to click that and check on Auto Resize. So at the very beginning, we're still going to have this normal box here. But basically what this is going to do is any area that Maya doesn't need to fill with a voxel, it's just not going to calculate those, right? So when I hit play, you'll see that this box immediately resizes, and as the steam gets bigger, so does that box, right? So it's only going to get to the size that we want it to, and it's going to continue to climb forever. Yes? Can I do it again? So let me undo it. All I did was select the Fluid 1 emitter, and then I just, on Fluid Shape 1, scroll down until I find the Auto Resize tab, and then I just check on Auto Resize. You're welcome. Now, what this will also do is it will limit the calculations necessary. So we may even be able to go up on our resolution a little bit, because it will also cap us out. Like there's a max resolution you can have there. Yes?
Can you come here for a moment? I mean, it's
Okay.
like that. I don't like this here. I can't play it to see if I'm doing it right.
Windows. Do I have minutes? Yeah, no. Go to fluids at the top and create some ways.
Yeah, let's fix that.
Right click on your timeline and set it to play back every frame max roll time. You have to hit stop. Oh, so you currently have the emitter selected. Select fluid 1. There you go. Okay. So again, these are a handful of like pretty quick questions, and we're actually not too far from finished on this. And I'll talk a little bit more about it. But one of the questions that did come up, and I see this come up occasionally, which is I accidentally lost a part of my UI. Right, like part of my time slider disappeared or whatever, right? Or my shelf disappeared. If you can get up here to your menu under Windows UI elements, here's all the different UI elements, and you can turn them on and off. Right, so you can turn your time slider off. But that's how you can also usually turn it back on. Now, occasionally that doesn't help because the thing that is missing is your actual menu. If that's the case, hold down your space bar, and you can also get to Windows there and turn your UI elements on and off, which I don't know that the menu is listed there. Status line is, so. Yeah. Okay. So like everything else in Maya, yeah, there we go. Like everything else in Maya, there are, or at least in the effects section, there are tons of attributes under this, right? We get all of this like stuff for surface, right? How's it going to render this, right? Or like liquids, like what is it even talking about? So if I enable a liquid simulation, does that look different? Actually, not drastically. A little bit, but not drastically, right? I want to unenable that. And if you go up here and look, we have a lot of these like content method things going on here. Density, velocity, temperature, fuel. Literally, we can use this as an igniting simulation, right? It's basically, we can call it like, or think of it like gasoline, and gasoline will affect the temperature in which something is burning or exploding, right? This simulation that we're getting steam out of is the same simulation that you would get an explosion out of, or the same simulation that you would get like propulsive, like flames, all sorts of different things, like billowing like black smoke, or even like some sort of like fantastical like green wispy effect, right? So all of that is kind of up to you, and I can show you that like we can go in here to dynamic simulation. We got all of this stuff. That's not actually where I wanted to go. Sorry, let me minimize some of this so I can find it. Yeah, it's actually content details. Right? And after I open up content details, it actually just opens up a whole bunch of other details, right? Density, velocity, turbulence, temperature, fuel, color, right? And we can have a lot of fun just kind of playing around with this. So my favorite one to start with is turbulence, right? Right now, if we watch our steam, it's very like calm, right? It just kind of rolls up. It kind of starts to sort of curl over at the top, right? But it's not very it's on a mission, heading straight toward the ceiling, right? It doesn't have any like it's been affected by wind or anything else, right? So if I turn up the strength of my turbulence, you'll start to see that we get a little bit more of that, right? We get a little bit more of this like wispy, like twisting and turning as it goes through the air, right? Now, here's the real test. Maybe my turbulence is a little too high there. Let me turn it back down. The real test is if I hit render right now. So I'm going to go to Arnold, open Arnold render view. I always use this one because I can have this interactive render. If I hit play on this, there we go. So even though I'm rendering and even though it looks great in my viewport, right now my steam kind of looks like a little ball of like fur or something in there. Like, this is not looking the best in the world in terms of the steam. And if I let it keep playing, we'll see, like, it continues to grow, but like that is not looking like what I'm expecting it to. Like, it's a little too thick. And so some of this stuff will allow us to control that as well. So density is one of them. If I turn down my density, my steam will start hopefully getting a little less dense. I can also control it a little bit under display, I think it is. Nope, it's not display. Yeah, there we go. Under shading, I have to click through a lot of these at times. So one of the things we're seeing here is transparency. And so I can start making it less transparent, where it's really just this like block of steam. Or I can start making it more transparent to make it a little bit like wispier. And then we have this option for color. Now, the color can be kind of neat. I can choose, I'm just going to show you this for fun. I'm going to choose green. That didn't work. Let's try it again. Green. And so we're going to start getting this green smoke coming out of there, right? Which is kind of cool, right? And you're going to see that the color input is constant. Well, when we get this this like block of color like this, if I click, I can add a second color input, right? And so I could change that to like purple, right? And what we're going to get now is that it's going to be somewhere between green and purple. But as you still see that when it's rendering as just purple, right? And that's because in our color input right now, it's set to constant. So I can change this to a lot of different things. I can change it to a Y gradient, right? Which means it's going to be purple at the bottom and green at the top, right? And if I want that purple to sort of climb up a little bit, I can do like that, and we're going to get green at the top of that. I can also change it to something like density, right? Which usually means that the, like how I have it right now is that the more dense areas are purple, and the less dense areas on the outside edges are green. You can't see the green the best in the world up on the screen here, but what that's going to do is allow us to change that. And if you think about an explosion, right? An explosion may be white in the center, and then it sort of fades out to like blue, and then to orange, and then to sort of this gray smoke on the outside, right? And so we can use this color to drive these really interesting simulations of this steam. But again, the reason I bring this up is because what I see here and what I see here are not going to be the same, right? And if I change my lighting, it's going to change it again, right? If I decide I wanted to add an HDR to my sky dome, let's go ahead and do that right now. Oh, look, I already have some. Let's do... Apparently I do not have good sky domes in here. Let me grab one really quick. So, again, if you don't know about this, I think I've told you before, but under DIGM Students, Student Resources, there's these HDR panoramas. So I'll grab something that sounds like a kitchen. How about small apartment? That will work. Control C. Control B. Oh, really? Okay. There we go. So now I have this small apartment. Where is it at? Open. So now this is my my HDR that's casting light. Always make sure that your color space is set to raw. But if I render this now, this is what I had, right? And when I render it, it's probably going to affect the way my Steam looks. Yes? Did you have a question?
How do you get it to render not as a cube?
Not as a cube? Let me show you this stuff. Okay, yeah, I'll show you that. So now my lighting looks better in this scene, but I can't see my Steam, right? Which means I'm going to have to turn up my density. So I may have to turn up a lot of stuff. So the way it's rendering as a cube, under shading here, when we start doing our density and turning that up, right? You're going to start getting closer to this like cube shape on here. So there's this drop-off shape that will allow you to kind of change it. But really, if it's rendering as a full cube, it probably means you have this turned up like that. Why is that not, mine's not rendering at all anymore? I wonder if I messed it up. Let's just turn this to constant. Let me actually kill that and reopen the render view. There we go. Now it's rendering right. So you can play around with a lot of different stuff. There's this cube drop off here. We could do sphere and sort of get something a little rounder, maybe. You could also, I don't know, like there's a whole bunch of different stuff you can kind of play around in here. Y gradient. Oh, that's neat. Never tried that. But you know, sphere may get you something a little bit better, and then you can turn down the density just a little bit. There we go. So I will say, just not to completely restart here, but the thing that I do notice in my render is that it looks like the center of my coffee is the only part that's hot, right? It's like I got this one little dot in the middle of my coffee that's emitting steam, right? You don't have to do it that way. One of the things that we can do, I'm just going to go ahead and delete my entire fluid here. There's other options, and for me, I have this this object here as my coffee. One of the things I could do is hit Control D to duplicate. I'll also remind you, like, Control D is the best way to do that. I've seen a lot of people who've been duplicating with like Control C, Control V, and that gets really messy. So Control D is going to be the best way of doing this. And so now I just have this duplicate object of my coffee here. And I'm going to grab all of these faces on the bottom and just delete them. So all I really have is just sort of this disc that looks like the top of my coffee. And I may even scale that a little smaller, maybe something like this, right? And move it down here kind of close again. And I'll call this my Steam disk, right? And I can actually now have this object emit steam. So if I go to fluids, I can, where's it at? Yeah, here we go. Under add edit content, emit from object. And so if I do that, let's see. Oh, maybe I have to make a 3D container first. Sorry, let me just think about this for a second. Yeah. 3D container, go ahead and create that. Select that. Fluids, add edit content, emit from object. And what I think will happen now is this has to be around it again, I think. And I can delete this. Let's see if that works. There we go. So from the beginning, I just moved this over here so it would be around it, because if this steam, or if this 3D container is somewhere else that's outside of that emitter, it's not going to show the steam that's emitting. But if we set this to auto resize again, what will happen is it will automatically snap it to, so many options, auto resize, there we go. It will automatically snap it to the emitter. And so then we can start emitting steam kind of from our coffee, right? A billowing, steamy coffee. So let's set that down to 30. Again, like, go back and forth and look between your render and your and what you're seeing in your viewport, because it looks like this in here. When I open Arnold Render Viewer, it's looking like this, which is much grayer, but still pretty, like, not the way we want it to look. Right? So I can just continue going down here and adjusting stuff like our density, our turbulence, and our transparency. So I'm going to add a little bit more turbulence to it. Turn down my transparency until it gets kind of more like this. And so this is still a pretty hot cup of coffee, but you should now start to get... Let me hit stop on this and let it build up some steam first. So now I hit play. So, this one's one that I'm not going to sort of micromanage on you. Like, I want you to play with this and get something steaming in your, or some form of use of this fluids, right? This is one of the elements that if it's in there and it's kind of working, like, I kind of grade this almost as pass-fail. Like, occasionally what will happen is you will put it in there and it will be working, but it will be rendering so light that I can't see it, which to me is effectively saying it's not there. So make sure it's renderable, something you can view, but still looks kind of natural, right? Again, this should just add a little bit of an element to your scene. So it's still, mine's still sort of rendering a little bit, but play with this and see what you get. See if you can get some kind of cool stuff on it. Now I will say, just like everything else, or not everything else, a lot of other effects, there's presets for this fluid. I haven't tried any of them, but now seems like a good time. And I have a feeling most of these are not going to be what we want them to be, such as Cloud Bank, right? Atomic orbitals. Like, yeah, that's what I want coming out of my coffee. Let's see what that does. Yeah, so it's not necessarily correct, right? I'm also not sure why it's trimming off the top of that. I wonder if that has something to do with my fluid container and its location. Go back to 0. Yeah. So, I do think that this kind of needs to still be around, our fluid container does still kind of need to be around our object. Yeah. So that's not... So you can play around with those presets. I have a feeling you're not going to find something that is coffee steam. They all seem to be stuff like Cloud Bank. Like, so if you're really wanting a, you know, haunted graveyard breakfast, then maybe that's your one to go for. So, all right. Questions on this? Yes.
My emitter, when I scaled it down to fit my scene, it started like just instantly filling up.
you scaled it down to.
Yeah, because when I make the fluid emitter, it's like cute, really big, and when I scaled it down, it soon does this. Just instantly filled up, and if I do it to where it auto resizes, it like starts filling up the whole scene and just like crashing around.
I think it's a scale thing.
Like it works fine when it's still here, but it's too big.
So grab your fluid one shape. Just kind of scroll up to the top of this. So source is size 10 by 10 by 10. I wonder if you can change that down to. You may have to rescale it in your channel box back to 1, but if you change that to 1 by 1.
Let's just
But and maybe if it was still scale, so go to your channel box. And see where it's all scaled like 0.1, 2, just type in 1. So try changing your. There's no check on this. It's still. I think what's happening is like. So, you've already simulated your serial.
no, I haven't yet.
Okay. So maybe one of the easiest ways to do this would be to actually grab all of your scenes and scale them up. So like everything you've seen scaled up. Because you see the grid size, like each of those little grid units, those are actually a centimeter. So,
I just see this.
and that's why it's doing that, is it's trying to see what happens. You probably is like reworking
Good job.
the size and stuff, still getting the vertical scale, but it hasn't simulated your serial. These are things that you can this is all go and scale it up to be to sort of be closer to the size of your stuff.
Yeah, that's too grand.
Okay. Yes.
First of all, this one is not going up right now.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit into it. I think that it's the, I think we may need to like recreate it in a different way. Yeah, but let's, so we have the,
That's not bad.
stop, that's what well, I think it's where you're skipping forward as like looking for ingredients. Yeah, it's just rendering in the stop.
That's obvious.
Yeah, but still. Let me tinker with this here in a minute. Let me go ahead and sort of make sure it's on. Okay. So I didn't bring an attendance sheet today. Actually, the last class period we filled up the attendance sheet, and I haven't remade a new one because things happen. I'm going to soon. Next class period is work time, and I just kind of want to emphasize like work time. You don't necessarily like have to show up for those. You get so many excused absences. You're welcome to decide to take one of those. But I will say, this is like due on Monday, right? And I always wake up on Monday morning to a sea of Marlo, this isn't working emails, right? That's what next class period's for, and that's also what Fridays are for. And usually Fridays, there's like literally 2 people in here. So I know 8 a.m. classes suck, but I would encourage you to be in here if you're fighting with stuff so I can help you work it out. I have a couple of things coming up in the near future here that are going to require me to close my office door, basically turning this class into a online version of this class. It's not only going to be online, but there'll be an online option. And that's basically so people can take it remotely. So it's a long story about that. But that means I have like hours of tutorial videos and stuff like that I need to create. So I will be in here helping all the times that I'm in this class, but my office door may not be open as often as it has been for the last few weeks here. So this class is going to be the best time for you to get feedback or for you to get help on the things that you're going to need help with. Again, I'll still answer emails, I'll still get back to you and whatever, but just, you know, it's my preference is to be able to sit down with you at the desk and help you work through it, right? So I encourage y'all to come out for that, or come out even if we're not having open lecture days. After this project, we're going to, probably the day that we look at the final, or the day that we look at what you turn in for this, I'm going to immediately kick off our final project, okay? And that's just to give you enough time to get started working on it. And there's a lot of open work time in that class, but there are also a couple of discussions that we have in class during that time too. And they're really important discussions. So, and some of them actually have graded items sort of attached to them. So, okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video. I will say, I think that somewhere in the process of doing this steam with the disk, something wasn't working right, and so I may have to figure that out and see what I clicked incorrectly in there. And so, just so you don't have to watch me fight through that on the video, I'll let you all know if there's something different to do there. I think it's the way that I created the fluid container. I think it just has to be created slightly differently. So, all right, cool. I'm gonna go and stop the video, and after that, the rest of the class is yours. Like, you are welcome to hang out here, work until the end of class, or if you're like, I need some breakfast because I had to skip breakfast and you're going to run out and grab that for your next class. I understand all of that. So, yes. You need help. Okay. Let me go and stop this video and upload it to YouTube. So.